Hello everyone in the Maggie Mesh group. Jerseydood here. This is Alexa's business logo. I gather that she's been in this group for quite a long time, but somehow has never managed to really learn how to digitize. So let's see what we can do about helping her out with her recent inquiry into that. I know that Fabiola has created a video on how she would do this. I've not watched it. I don't know anything about it, but safe to say it's probably quite good. Let's try my method of doing it. There may be some crosstalk between the two, and we may have completely different ways of coming up with solutions for some of it. Might be very interesting. We can see there are numerous problems here. There are numerous inconsistencies with a lot of this stuff. I grouped all of the components together. I brought this in as a Jan file. I see a lot of extraneous stuff in here that I don't understand, which leads me to believe that importing it into MBX V5 may have corrupted some of the pieces and parts and added a bunch of stuff in. I won't even go into that. I'll just do my own version, and maybe we'll come up with some different ways of doing the same thing. There's always different ways to get to the same point. Let's start with these simple little vertical pieces here. You could draw this many different ways. I can see that these are pretty well configured. Some of the bottoms here are a little bit sloppy. Whether that shows up or not in the actual stitch out is, you'd have to try it and see. It may show as being a little ragged. It may not. You just have to try. One thing I noticed though when I choose the reshape tool is I see a lot of extraneous nodes in here. None of this information is necessary in between the top and the bottom. I gather this was probably created with a digitized block type tool. I think this was done in Hatch 2, which is very similar to MBX. In fact, Wilcom is the company that developed the Genome software, so it's basically Hatch software. So, and in fact, Hatch 2 and MBX V5.5 are virtually identical, so I'm told. This is V5. I see all this stuff, and these nodes are all extraneous in here. They are not necessary. I could probably get rid of a lot of them just by simply deleting them. Let's see what happens. Select a pile of these here, get rid of them. There's a lot of extraneous information here. You can see the shape is changing somewhat radically. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that's just utterly unnecessary. I'm going to go back with my back arrow and completely start over again. Let's try just doing a simple little drawing of this with the rectangle tool. I'll just pick the points visually and bang. It defaults to Tommy or Tatami, according to Dear Mags. I will change it to that. Now this defaults to 15 degrees. I don't want it at 15 degrees. I will grab the bar and I'll drop it to 0. That's what I want it to look like. I'm going to change it to red. Now, to change this shape, I'll simply select that node, use the arrow key, run it up by sight. That'll probably work fine. Take the end point and move it to the actual end now. That will probably stitch just fine. Now my preference is for manual stitch spacing, as this is set up for. I prefer 014. That's the way I've found. I like that density the best. It is tight enough to look nice and dense without overly burdening the stitch count. So there we've created a nice smooth even piece. You can see at the bottom of this it's much simpler, it's much cleaner. This one has, you can see these nodes down in here. Everything was created at an angle. I'm not sure why, but that is what gave us this funny little extra row, few rows of stitches that are at a strange angle. This stuff down in here. Extraneous garbage. Whether that actually shows up or not is a debatable point. If you were to use very fine needles and very fine thread, it would definitely show. So that's something to consider. Now we've got a second one just like that next to it. And the easiest way to recreate one of those is just to duplicate it. Run it over with the arrow keys. And you may notice if you zoom way out, the arrow keys are much faster. So if you've got to move a piece way across the design, by zooming out, you can much more quickly move a piece. That was something I discovered sort of by accident. So, there I've got two pieces. Now I can change the shape of this in two ways. I can either select these and run them down, or I can run the whole design down and bump it up a little bit there, choose to reshape, select these, run them up. Now I'm a guy that likes to do everything like a mechanical designer or a draftsman. I like to do things using grids and so on. And you could turn the grids on if you wanted to, but the grid lines don't necessarily always match what I'm doing. So I will do my own grids. I've chosen the open line tool. Now if I hold the control key down, I can get a perfect horizontal line. We start to see some deficiencies in the original design here. We can see that there are numerous things that are not really symmetrical. So I've got my first line here. I need to drag this one down a couple ticks in order to make it line up. If I wanted to make this really clean, I would probably pick something. This right here is fairly crisp. Let me also, I'll start here, I'll drag down across to make my line plenty long. I'll match the angle of that part. I'll make another grid line so that I've got another line there. Now I can use that piece, run it across. Now it's wider than everything, so I can grab it anytime I want. I can run it down here. Well, we can see that those angles don't match either, do they? So now I've got a reference line. I can change this guy by selecting the node and bumping up the node with the arrow keys to about there. Now this guy doesn't even come close to the same height, so I can bump this up with the arrow keys, then just simply select this node, bring it up with the arrow keys. Now I have two lines that are symmetrical to each other. And yeah, a lot of this stuff doesn't really show when you stitch it, but my basic rule of thumb is shoot for perfection. Shoot for absolute perfection, and you will probably end up with something that is really, really good. It may not be perfect, but you've minimized the number of flaws in it. So we've got a couple of important grid lines going here. These two are useful. We can see that this part is well short of being level with these other pieces. We can create something by using these grid lines that I've just drawn to really establish something crisp and clean. Now, the next pieces I will create will be up here. You can clearly see that this blue line across here is not even or flush. There's funny things going on with stitch angles here. If I look at it in reshape, I see all kinds of nodes in here. There's a round node over here, there's a square node here. It's a bit of a mishmash. Quite honestly, there are a couple of pieces here. This upper part is a separate piece. Again, I don't know why. I don't know if it was designed that way, or if transferring it into this program made it screwed it up somehow. I'm not really sure. It may have corrupted it. So we've got these lines here. Now I don't particularly care for the stitch angle here. These again look like they were created with the digitized block tool. A lot of this information is utterly superfluous. I could create this in different ways. You can't create it using the straight line tool because the ends will be perpendicular to the runs. The rise lines will be perpendicular to the runs, so you won't get this angle in there. You would have to create it either by using the rectangle tool or using the digitized blocks tool. You could do it either way. It doesn't really matter. Digitized blocks tool. Choose fill this time. I always forget to do that. Why don't we also open line? Let's create a vertical reference point. Control key, enter. Now we've got a vertical line. That way I can better assure that I have a solid reference point, a starting point for this line out here. It needs to come back a couple ticks. Okay, now let's do our digitized blocks and change it to fill this time, which I should have done last time. Let's start right in the corner here. Tap. I can make it vertical by holding the control key. Choose 0.18 inches in the width indicator. And I'll let go of the control key. Come down by I to this point. Tap. Now back to the control key again. No, let it go. Didn't work. Let's go. I didn't mean to hit that so soon. Backspace key takes me out of that node. That was a mistake because it didn't quite get to 0.18. And tap again. There's my piece. Tap, enter, double click, change it to satin stitch, manual space, 0.014, which is my preference. I think it shows as quite solid without overburdening the stitch count. And there is a nice part there. It's 0.18 inches wide on both ends. It's nice and square. It's flush. Everything is well aligned. Now, I'll choose that part and I will duplicate it and use the arrow keys and run it up. I know that the spacing along this left vertical will be exact because I used the arrow keys. The only thing that changes is the shape of the end of the line down here. So this is going to require a little chicanery. Get rid of that end point. That's always in the way. I'm going to draw this down visually, trying not to really change the width of the line any. I can see where, see the ghost of the old outline, the black line under there? I can bring it down right along that and drop it. Now this one, bring back, okay, bring it to there.